Xarelto continues to kill patients, while the FDA continues to ignore it. See the story at drugsafetynews.com.
More than 50 million automobiles were recalled for defects last year, making 2015 the single largest year for recalls. Many of these recalls have gone unfixed by consumers, which is leaving millions of unsafe vehicles on our roads. This is not only a danger to that driver, but to all drivers on our roads. And joining me now to discuss the rampant corporate negligence that leads to these recalls, as well as some of the worst recalls happening right now, is attorney David Haynes. So David, the news has been a buzz throughout the entire month of January and now into February about the fact that we had tens of millions of auto recalls in 2015, more than any other year on record, surpassing 2014, where we also had tens of millions of recalls. This is not just, another example of, it was poorly manufactured. Most of these recalls go back to a decision that somebody higher up in the chain made and said, look, we can save money by cutting cost on X, and that ends up leading to a recall almost every time.
Farron, you're absolutely right. These are conscious decisions by the automakers to cut costs and at the risk of safety and death on our highways. It's totally egregious and inexcusable. In the case of VW, these were conscious decisions as well, just to game the system. They couldn't meet the emission standards. Now you've got a crisis of millions of auto owners whose vehicles are worth much less than what they paid for them. In the case of GM, which is just a horrible situation, you have up to 124 deaths at least that we know of that are attributable to the ignition switch defect issue, which was like a $3 part, and engineers wanted to cover it up. So just a terrible situation, and the recalls keep coming.
With that GM recall, that's something that you and I have discussed in the past. What's the current status of that? I know at one point there had been talk of possibly, getting some of these GM executives held accountable in more ways than just a fine. Has anything developed new in that front?
The administrative and regulatory investigations are ongoing. Do we expect to see criminal charges? We should, but will we? Probably not. And also litigation is ongoing. There's some consolidated litigation, multi-district litigation that's going. Bankruptcy filings as well with GM, which are, they're trying to put a wrench in the works and not take responsibility for it, which they need to step up to the plate and deal with these victims appropriately. So here's what we see is just a repeat of this corporate culture where they refuse to take responsibility for their conscious decisions to put profits over people. It's just a terrible situation that keeps replaying itself out in the news.
And it is something. It's all obviously not just limited to the automobile industry. We see this across the board, especially in your line of work. It is constant. The decisions get made. How can we save a couple dollars? And in GM's case, it was maybe $3 a vehicle, and people died. People died over $3. That's how little these companies value the lives of American citizens. To me, that right there is absolutely unacceptable.
It's so true. And if it wasn't for a plaintiff's lawyer in Georgia representing one of these families, we still may not know what the problem was in these vehicles. And it's through litigation that this only came to light. So if people think that, there are too many lawsuits or it's litigation run amok, then think about that next time that you go to crank on your Saturn or your other GM vehicle where the part was faulty. And thanks to a crusading lawyer in Georgia, he's helped to make our vehicles more safe when you have big companies like GM that don't have your best interests at heart, just trying to pad their bottom line. So, we were together well over a year ago talking about Takeda and the recalls there, and it's continued to just drip out.
You see, Takeda is one I definitely wanted to ask you about. Again, you and I have spoken about this before, and I think it's a very important issue because Takeda is one that is once again in the headlines. Just last week, we had two Democratic lawmakers that wrote President Obama and said, look, you have to do something about this problem. It was we had Blumenthal and Edward Markey, two Democratic senators, and they said, look, you have to put a stop to this. You have to get Takeda to confirm that they will not use this specific airbag inflator chemical that they'd been using. And we have to know now. We cannot wait, 3 or 4 years down the road, which is what the administrator or the NHTSA had given them, was 3 or 4 years to find out if the problem is something that needs to be corrected, if we should do anything, if the existing are safe. And once again with Takeda, we have an instance, people are dying. Tell us the whole Takeda story, because this is absolutely beyond belief.
It's so true. We have the main problem has to do with the ammonium nitrate, which is a propellant. And what happens is in humid and hot areas, particularly the southeastern United States, but also other areas, that this ammonium nitrate will break down, essentially in those sort of weather conditions. And what happens then when the airbag does fire, it fires at too strong a force. And what we're seeing in cases that are coming into our office and other law firms around the country is you have a lot of shrapnel, metal, and other debris that then is striking the driver. And there even have been at least one death associated with it, and other very serious, maiming and laceration type issues. The very frustrating thing is that well over a year ago, when this recall began, we knew that it wasn't the full scope of it. Takeda, which is, I believe, a Japanese company, has just been in denial. But the problem is here in the United States, where you have hundreds of millions of vehicles, particularly Honda, but many other makes and models that are using Takeda airbags, that the manufacturers haven't stepped up to do the right thing. And you don't have appropriate enforcement in the Department of Transportation and in the NHTSA organization as well, where they're just letting them, and as you say, giving them years to correct the problem. How about no? How about now? And instead of, drip, 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 the recalls, 5, 10 different recalls. One was announced this morning, yesterday, another one earlier this week, another couple 100,000 vehicles here and there. I mean, we're up to millions of vehicles. Step up and do the right thing. Don't do it in the first place, but once you realize you have a problem, then you really have a situation on your hands where you have to step up and do the right thing. It doesn't matter about the business and the dollars and cents. It's going to be better for business in the long run anyway. Get these vehicles off the road, get them fixed. And of course, the recalls now are so extensive. We've got over 50 million vehicles recalled worldwide, over 24 million in the U.S., and only I think of about a fourth of vehicles on all recalls have actually been repaired. So, a huge number of vehicles out on the road that are unsafe.
So we're looking at these massive numbers of recalls from 2015, and only about 25% of them have been repaired. I mean, that is astounding, because we have, potentially millions of vehicles out there right now that are not safe to drive. They're certainly not safe for the operator. And in the case of this GM faulty switch, if that goes out and your car shuts down when you're doing 80 miles an hour down the interstate, you become essentially an 80-mile-an-hour missile that you cannot control. You can't stop. You can't turn. You just have to hope that there's nobody in your way. And so at that point, you put everybody's life at risk. And the biggest problem with all of the recalls is that there is no real system to get these recall notices out to consumers, because for the most part, in a lot of these cases, they just don't know. They don't know if they have that vehicle. They don't know if there is a problem, because there's no system to make sure everybody finds out and has the ability to take it into a dealer to get fixed.
It's absolutely. I mean, these vehicles need to be made properly in the first place. These recalls, need to be significantly decreased, because, as you say, of logistical problems about getting these vehicles and the recalled issues repaired, they're just not happening. Only 25%. So we've got tens of millions of vehicles on the road, which are very dangerous, threatening not only the vehicle owner or their families and guests, but, as you say, other vehicles that are on the road that they could injure other people. And so folks need to go online. They need to look at the NHTSA website. They need to try to educate themselves, and they need to take time out. Unfortunately, due to this corporate neglect, they're going to have to inconvenience themselves, but are going to have to go and try to get these vehicles repaired properly as soon as possible.
Let me ask you a question. I don't even know if there is an answer to this, but if someone does have this a defective car from any recall, if they have a lawsuit claim, are they able to also add in the cost of missing a day or two's worth of work to go get their vehicle fixed? Is that something that's able to be recouped, or? Well,
there are absolutely financial remedies that are available, particularly in the case of the VW emissions that we talked about earlier. There's significant litigation involved with that. Our firm is involved with that litigation, and so you can contact us or others to find out what your rights are with diminution of value and other inconveniences. Certainly there technically would be financial compensation that might be available in some of these other cases, but if you're going in and the recall can be done probably as a practical matter. Unfortunately, it's not going to be worth bringing the litigation for the inconvenience factor on behalf of individuals. But if you have a situation where a large class of individuals and all the vehicles are devalued, then there can be class action and other litigation that can be brought.
And so everyone watching this needs to check that NHTSA website. And unfortunately, you have to check it often. I mean, you got to go back every 2 to 3 months because, I check it for my vehicle. I think the last time we talked, I immediately got back on there. And sure enough, I had a recall on there. I drive a Jeep, and it became part of the ignition switch that I had to go get fixed. And if I hadn't looked, I would not have known. I would not have known. I never got a letter. I never got a phone call. I checked the website, and it was there.
There you go, right there. I mean, the notification process is a real problem. These are things that we need to nip in the bud in the manufacturing. The culture needs to be changed. The enforcement mechanisms need to be changed. We need to demand more of our government and more of our big auto manufacturers. It needs to be safer road conditions for all motorists.
Absolutely. David Haynes, we appreciate the work that you do, and thank you for talking with us today.
Thank you, Farron.